right, a bit of nostalgia for you. So I think it was episode 2 of the ETC podcast, like 2 or 3. Yeah, very early on. There was basically this intro where we had talked about how we just fiddled around for hours trying to make my old audio interface work, which I still have in front of me actually, which annoyingly doesn't work anymore because the company decided to just stop supporting it software-wise, even though the hardware is still perfectly intact. And I am very bitter because this is like $500 device. Like, that's not cheap.
You just can't use it.
Yeah, just can't use it. When I was starting to get back into podcasting, I was like, oh, this is great. It's one of the few audio interfaces that has 2 headphone inputs. That's what allowed us to record the ETC podcast. It's got like 4 great mic inputs, all awesome. And at the time, though, the driver software, which again is still kind of like an outdated term, well, especially for Macs. Right. It was kind of giving us issues, and we started off that episode being like, oh my God, if you guys knew the hours that we just spent trying to debug this thing, and then it just started working. It was one of these things where like just turning things on and off and plugging things in and praying to the gods and doing a little dance just made things work.
Yeah. Computer troubleshooting. That's yeah.
And we haven't really run into that since because, I bought myself a new audio interface, not nearly as expensive, like $150. You bought yourself a nice Rode microphone, little plug and play, everything works great, right? And, for a long time we've had, like you're listening on just some wired headphones. I had my AirPods, everything's working right. And 65 episodes later, we are still dealing with these annoying issues. Yeah. So for the past 10, 15 minutes, my AirPods decided to die. First world problems. But yeah, definitely kind of annoying. And I don't know what's happened to them. I know if I reset them, they'll be fine. But just as we're recording our penultimate episode of the season, they decided to die. And now I'm kind of doing old school Bose wired headphones. I think I bought these in like 2015 and they're still working all right, actually.
Through a dongle, right? That's the
dongle.
Key detail here.
Exactly. All right, welcome everybody to the ETC podcast, your one-stop pod for entertainment, technology, and cars. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Senenkar.
It is episode 65 for this wonderful April 15th, 2021, the penultimate episode of the season. It's been an awesome run, but we only have 2 episodes left, and then we're going to take a hiatus. So, it's been a pretty exciting season. We had our first fan-requested fan-driven episode with the Big E episode, which was received very well. Actually, in fact, I think it's one of the most viewed versions of our episodes.
Oh, viewed, okay.
Yeah. So probably at least 4, 5 views, maybe. But all jokes aside, I think it was actually one of our most viewed videos. So that was pretty good. Had a lot of fun there, and we. Were there any other highlights for you this season?
I mean, just the fact that, we've been pretty consistent, right?
Yeah.
Like, started back up and I think we've been pretty solid. We didn't miss a week except for when you came down with an unspecified illness, but it was just that one week.
It is an unspecified illness that seems to have happened to me relatively regularly since March of 2020. But no, it's it's funny. I was talking to my friend Dave, and he not the Dave that we talk about normally on this podcast, a different Dave. This is Dave C.
Does he have an iPhone or an Android phone is the main question.
He has, I believe, an iPhone, actually. Okay. Yeah, I think he's not he's not an Apple fanboy by any means.
The universe is in balance then.
Yeah, exactly. This is all kind of funny because I just finished Dark yesterday, actually, and this is all adding up to that. But anyways, I digress. Anyways, so he didn't know we did this, the ETC podcast. And he's always been a really kind of good supporter of my stuff, so I'm really happy to have him as a friend and a supporter. Anyways, so when I showed him the ETC podcast, he was like, wow, you guys have been doing this like pretty consistently. And I have to say, when it comes to our kind of attempts at projects and things, we've tried a lot of stuff, and some things take flight and some things don't. I am very happy that since we returned in September, that we have been very consistent, actually.
Yeah, and a lot of bad things over the last year or so. That has forced us to stay at home and limited our activities. But I think this is actually one of the highlights. I think, and I think maybe part of the reason it's so consistent is not too many ways to just do stuff with other people, right? And so
totally.
This has been a good kind of once a week. Again, 80% of it I think is just discussion between two of us, not really anything prepared or.
well, you know what? There are so many podcasts I think that take that format. That I am very I have to say I feel very fortunate that we do have the small listener base that we do have that are willing to, because I'll be honest, I think our podcast is pretty good. I think we have a good mix of not vaguely, what's the word I'm looking for? We have a good mix of very surface news. Yeah. Combined with an occasional unplanned, really good discussion, and good debate. Yeah. I can't remember if it was a couple episodes ago or not, but there was some really good debate we had about. I can't even remember. Anyway,
there's been some good ones. Yeah, some good, very philosophical and editorial, commentary from ourselves. Yeah,
totally. And I think the dynamic that we have is good because I feel like. We definitely have different perspectives on these things. But yeah, so it's funny because we're reminiscing like we've been doing this for a crazy long time. But it's only been 12 episodes since we did this last time. Like we did a season finale in December and we were kind of already doing this. But anyways, it's been an awesome season 7. But next week will be our last episode. And we do not have anything special planned. It's just going to be a good old regular ETC, unless you look like you have something planned.
Well, I would say I don't have anything planned, but it is very timely. There's a lot of stuff going on, and so I think we mentioned before. I think it's the day. Is it the day after, or is it on Earth Day? I forget.
I think you said it was Earth Day. I think it is Earth Day next. Let me just see here. Earth Day is Thursday, April 22nd. Yeah.
There you go. So very well planned. There's an Apple event next week, and so again, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of topics to discuss from that. So maybe it's going to be a bit of a wrap up of what's going on in the world.
Yeah. So let's start off with a bit of news here. So we, when we came back to the podcast in September-ish, so fall of last year. We don't really discuss a lot of COVID on this podcast. I mean, this is a little bit of escapism. But one of the things we did talk about was the kind of situation with the entertainment industry and specifically about movies, right? We talked about Tenet. And then there was this one time we were talking about all the movies that have been delayed or kind of unknown, right? And we talked about Tenet was obviously one of the biggest ones that we talked about. But then we talked about James Bond, No Time to Die, Black Widow, and Fast and Furious 9. Right. So the good news is 2 out of 3 of those are now officially going to be released. So they were delayed from last year. Black Widow, a couple of weeks ago, they announced that they were coming. Black Widow's coming out, I think, in July. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's sometime around July. So they were originally supposed to come out. It was originally supposed to come out May of last year. July's coming out. It looks awesome. I mean, Disney is absolutely killing it with MCU. Are you caught up on Winter Soldier?
I believe so. Yeah.
That last episode, I don't want to give any spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it, but the ending of that last episode really brought me back. I was don't get me wrong, I love MCU and I love that show. I think WandaVision is a bit more original than that show. This is kind of very traditional action movie. And again, I just talked about watching Dark. I've been very caught up in Dark, and Dark seems so much more cerebral and kind of out there. But I have to say, when that episode ended I think we watched it on Sunday, but the last Friday's episode, I was like, wow, that's really good. So anyways, really excited about Black Widow coming out in July. I didn't realize till I started rewatching actually a lot of the MCU how much, because I guess a lot of people have been vying for when is Black Widow going to get her own movie? Because I didn't realize how many movies she was in. Because I'd never seen Iron Man 2. I didn't realize she was in that. There's some other like she just keeps popping up in all these movies, so it is good that she's getting her own movie. But that's not the main topic today. Hours before we started recording, a new Fast 9 trailer came out. Yeah, so I guess it's officially called F9, the Fast Saga. I'm not sure if it's called Fast 9 or Furious 9. I think literally it might be called F9. I mean,
they're running out of permutations, right? Of
yeah. Okay. Let's do a little quiz here, Aaron. Let's see how good your Fast and Furious knowledge is, because I would say I'm pretty good at this game. So let's see how many of them you can name accurately. Okay, so let's start with one. What was the very first one called?
Yeah, it's been forever since I looked at this. I mean, I would assume it was just called the Fast and Furious.
Very
Fast
close.
And Furious. Yeah,
it's like the Fast and the Furious.
There's two the.
I believe there's two thes. Yeah, the Fast and the Furious.
I don't know if this works if both of us are unsure.
All right, number 2. You should know, like, no question.
3. No. Okay, yeah. The second one was just Too Fast, Too Furious, right?
Yeah.
And then third one was Tokyo Drift.
Yep. 4.
Best one.
Best one. I don't know about that. But number 4.
What was the fourth one? See, this is where things get murky.
Yeah, this is where things get really weird.
Yeah, the fourth one, man, was that the one that was just called Fast and Furious?
It was, and you know what?
Just dropping the
We covered that on the podcast. I remember that being one of the big things we talked about, how they took away the thes.
Yeah. Okay, and then
5.
I think 5 was just Fast 5, right?
Yeah. You're doing well. You're doing well. All right. 6.
I don't know if I feel proud of this or I don't know why this is taking up knowledge in my brain.
Actually, 6 is the one I'm unsure about. I definitely know 7. I definitely know 8. 6 is one I'm not sure about, to be honest.
I'm trying to even remember the plot of 6. 6 was the one in Dubai.
No, that's 7. 6 is the one
7.
with the Luke Evans.
Oh, okay.
The introduction of Luke Evans.
Yeah. 6. Yeah, actually, I'm drawing a blank on 6.
6, I am too. So if you know the answer, write us in podcast.etc@gmail.com or tweet at us.
Yeah.
7. Do you know 7?
7.
This is how you know we need to end the season of the podcast. Now we're just quizzing
this
each other
is the
Fast and Furious.
I don't know what was the last 2. Yeah, I remember the plots, but
so 7 was Furious 7.
Oh, okay.
And 8 was The Fate of the Furious.
The Fate of the
Yeah, because like F8 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So 9, F9, Fast Saga, brand new trailer dropped.
Man.
Just dropped today.
Yeah.
I think today. Really good. It looks awesome. It looks really good. And they have an official release date. So June 25th.
Cool. I mean, they're basically like at this point, I think, after next month, I think basically the floodgates are going to open because the US is basically back to normal, right? Like
are they? I know vaccinations are going well, but our operations kind of
like theaters are for the most part open, and I suspect over the next few months it's gonna things are gonna get more back to normal, and also it's also gonna be the perfect time again for these movies to land because people that haven't been in a theater for a year are probably gonna be really anxious to go start seeing a movie. So and of course Canada probably doesn't really factor into their sales that much. So this seems like now all those movies that were delayed probably will now start moving into theaters.
It's interesting because I'm surprised Bond hasn't been announced yet, because that was like the first big one to be like we're delaying, right? So I'm curious what they're going to do with that.
It could also be maybe they're relying on more like the global box office sales, and so maybe with Bond they're waiting not just for the US but a lot of other countries as well. To get more open.
Right. So, a surprisingly amazing franchise that has stood the test of time. Very excited about that movie coming out, and very excited that there's an official drop date for that. Nice. Also missing from our lives in the last little while has been a famous Canadian band that I don't know where they've been for the last little while, but Arcade Fire. So
yes, I think I heard about this.
You heard about this, yes. So they've clearly been hard at work because I guess they released a 45-minute song. Now, here's the thing. I don't know anything about this, so maybe you can fill in the gaps.
Nope, that's well, you probably know that it's within an app, which is really everything about this is very strange.
What is the app? I don't like. What is this?
They are releasing this within the meditation app Headspace.
Oh yeah. Actually, you know, I do know that app. I think.
So Headspace is essentially an app that guides you through meditation. So, you know, everything from like, you know, if you want to, if you're just a beginner, and it's kind of narrated, right? So all you do is you load it up, listen to the instructions, and they give you kind of instructions on how to meditate in various ways. So yeah, I haven't, like, everything about this is quite strange, but you know, I guess this is a good kind of, I haven't heard a lot from Arcade Fire the last few years. So this is a good kind of, you know, if they want to do a little bit of a return, right? You know, obviously catching headlines, right? So I don't know exactly, you know, how you make a 45-minute, like it's a single song, right? Like that's I think what the news is. But what I suspect is because Headspace has a lot of, you know, there's like guided just listening and stuff like that to relax. And this is kind of still strange, but I wonder if they just recorded something that's sort of like if you need to, you know, meditate or unwind for 45 minutes.
Yeah, a little bit like kind of atmospheric.
Yeah.
Cigaros, like kind of slow. Like recently I've been at work, I've been listening to a lot of like playlists that are like uplifting music or focus music or whatever, right? I
you
feel
just
like
kind of fade in the background.
Yeah. Unless you know, it would be amazing though if it was like a 45-minute version of Wake Up or something like that. Just like one of their classics.
The opposite of relaxing, just rocking out.
Just huge rocking out song.
All right. Well, I actually have the news thing loaded.
Yeah.
Because clearly you and I don't know the details. So it gets more interesting. Apparently this was done in collaboration with John Legend, which is that's kind of cool.
That's cool.
And yeah, it's obviously it's in Headspace. So unfortunate. This is where it's weird. Headspace is a paid app. So you have to pay a monthly fee to access it. So this is kind of weird because I guess you can't just go on, you know, Apple Music or Spotify to listen to it, right? It's kind of behind. So very interesting. Again, don't know much beyond that, but it seems like an interesting kind of. I wonder if we're going to start seeing more kind of artists do things like this.
Yeah, I'm very curious. Like, I mean, I have to imagine that it's Headspace that approached Arcade Fire and not
yeah,
but who knows, right? They are a pretty original band, and maybe they're like, we're gonna release this on Headspace.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to. I mean, I was never as well versed. Like, you were definitely a way bigger Arcade Fire fan than I was. I definitely am not well versed in their music. But I am very curious what this song is, and a 45-minute song, like.
It's so they're on their Instagram. They say happy to share memories of the age of anxiety, and that's like the title of the song.
Yeah,
created in partnership with Headspace and John Legend. Meditative vibes to help you focus and feel inspired.
Yeah,
so
very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
The thing that came to mind as soon as I heard that, like, I think you were there, right? Were you at the Dave Matthews concert where he played like a 32-minute version of 41? Were you there? I can't remember now.
I mean, I was at a Dave Matthews concert, and he usually does, like, it was not unusual for him to do an extended, like, with that song.
He usually does extended versions, but just not 32 minutes. Like, it was like, I remember like when that song started, it felt like the concert was only halfway through, and then when it was done, it was like that was the end of the concert.
Yeah, that was awesome.
It was really crazy. So Arcade Fire. You know, you can listen to it today on Headspace. Download it in the App Store.
If you subscribe to Headspace, you can.
Yeah, Google Play. Robosen. Have you heard of this company?
What?
Robosen, like
Robosen. No, sounds cool though.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. It's probably like, I think it's Robosen, something like that. So this is I don't know if they're primarily a toy company or primarily a robotics company. Like the products that I know that they've released are toy robots. So these kind of sophisticated toy robots. But they have released what is probably one of the coolest toys I've ever seen. And I must admit, I stole that from the stole it from the girl whose YouTube video I watched. I think she was doing it for, it was either IGN or The Verge or something like that. So she reviewed this toy and she was like, coolest toy ever. I'm like, so I kind of heard about this and I was like, whatever. It's just another one of these toys. But when I saw it in action, I was like, okay, this thing is actually very cool. So first of all, you have to keep in mind that this is a toy. It is a robotic toy, but it does cost, I believe, $700 US.
Just by that description alone, I kind of want it. Like,
yeah.
Like I know this is going to be good. So yeah. What is this $700 robot?
I'm pretty sure. It's probably one of these things where it's like $7.99 or something. No, I'm pretty sure it's $700 robotic toy. Okay.
Yeah.
It responds to voice commands. It is controllable via your phone. So you can kind of control whatever. But I haven't mentioned the two coolest facts about this robotic toy. The first one is that it is Optimus Prime. So
nice.
So Robosen partnered up with Hasbro to create.
I was gonna ask, this is like an official,
it's an official crazy. Optimus Prime. It's even got Peter Cullen's voice, like the original voice, which is point number one. Point number two is you can just have it on your desk. And it does, it moves, it responds to voice command. And one of the voice commands it responds to is transform. And this thing just transforms by itself.
Okay, so this is a full, this is a very very Transformer. So it's a full blown Optimus Prime. Then it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Without his trailer, but it is his exactly. It's like they've done other robots, but this is one they did. Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
And granted, he doesn't transform exactly how the cartoon does and how the whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still amazing. Like to watch this thing, because the craziest thing is, right, like it starts as the truck and you tell him to transform and he transforms by himself and stands up by himself.
Yeah.
And balances and still moves and stuff. And like you can tell him to it's really, awesome. Really crazy to see.
Yeah.
Like even it's pretty cool too. Like they use the kind of original cartoon Transformer noise when he transforms. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. The only thing my only complaint with it's a stupid complaint. But okay, the Transformer noise, right? The like kind of it's like a 2 or 3 second noise, right? And in the cartoon, they kind of transformed within those 2 or 3 seconds, maybe a little longer. But the problem with this is that this thing takes maybe 10 seconds to transform.
Right. Yeah.
So they have to kind of just play that sound over and over again. And it just doesn't quite sound perfect.
Yeah.
But it is by far the coolest version of Optimus Prime that I've ever seen. I as a kid, I was very lucky to have a lot of Transformers. I never actually had the original Optimus Prime. It was one of the ones that I never had, actually.
Okay.
So
and they didn't transform themselves. So
it definitely did not transform itself. You got to see this thing, and it's pretty big. It stands 19 inches tall. So that's a pretty hefty robot. But I believe $700. So it's a bit pricey to pay.
Yeah.
Logitech is exiting the Harmony remote business.
Oh yeah. I think they're still selling them currently, right? Like they're still current models of
so I think they're just stopping manufacturing.
Yeah. This was an interesting because I don't
sign of the times a bit, right?
Yeah, I mean I have never really had I think I had one a really long time ago, but not recently. But you do, right? You have more kind of like you use it and
I was a super big advocate of them, and I totally get it. Like more and more people. Like you look at the Apple TV remote, right? Or whatever. It can control everything you need. Like smart TVs, like that remote basically can control everything. Like, it is sad because like, I think the older I get, I don't know if it's a financial, like economical thing, but like, I like to extend the life of what I have as much as I can. Right.
Yeah.
And like, I still have a TV from 2011 or 10, or actually even before then. Yeah. Like 2010, 2011, like old, like 8 years old or something. I still have old school receiver, old speakers, a speaker wire, you know, and it still is awesome. Like I like my
Yeah.
home theater. It's perfectly fine. I still don't have a 4K TV, right? It's like all very old school. And because it's all old school, like there's not a lot of smart integration, right? And
Yep.
you know what I like about Harmony is they came out with that hub that allows you to kind of have smart integration with all those things. So I kind of like all that whole ecosystem. It's worked really well for me
Yep.
for years now. But I totally understand it, and it's just kind of sad because I feel like they were kind of the last, like they were the only name in kind of universal remotes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And I feel like this is like, you know, they seem like a pretty smart company because I feel like I feel like people are still buying those things, right?
Yeah.
And so they're probably seeing a little further ahead. And rather than waiting, you know, for basically this to completely die off, they're probably, you know, predicting and seeing, because I don't think this is a solved problem yet. You know, like you did mention, you know, a lot of these really good, I don't know what you call an Apple TV, like that kind. There's a few different like
the kind of set top boxes or
yeah. It's still not perfect, right? And you still can't control everything through it necessarily, right? I mean, I think honestly the biggest maybe the biggest jump in the last few years has been control over HDMI, right?
Yeah.
That's probably been the biggest jump because you know, like with your even Apple TV and a lot of these devices now, it can control the TV through the HDMI, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think has been the biggest leap, but it's still not ideal. Like, you know, I don't think like you'd have to limit yourself basically if you're okay only using one single set top box, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it'll get there, and yeah, I'm kind of curious to see where this goes. Like at some point in time, I thought that maybe things would trend towards more the software side of things, right? Where you use your phone, you know, voice commands and stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. Like unless Apple maybe comes out with something next week, we'll see. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the best bet here is for basically what's happened with HDMI to continue, so that there's a bit of a universal spec, right?
Yeah.
So that, you know, right now I don't know what control over HDMI. I think it's volume and input. Like it's not a lot of stuff, right? It's like volume input. I think if they extend that to being able to control like the software, like over HDMI, then I think, you know, that will then be the best solution, right? Because then everything becomes a universal remote, kind of, right? Like,
it's so tricky because like I feel like there is a you know, that's why I actually think the design of the Apple remote is kind of heading in the right direction, because it's like you have a touchpad which allows you to have the flexibility of software, right? Like they can put anything up on screen and you can kind of control that. But then you still have some physical buttons for things like volume and stuff like that. Because I will tell you, like, you know, and I think you agree with me on this. Like, I don't like the trend of things like in cars and in like TV and stuff, like traditional things that have been physical controls. I don't like the trend of that going to your phone, right? Like right now, again, with the Harmony Hub, I can control my entire TV with my phone, but it's the most annoying experience ever, right? It's like unlock your phone, find the app, get like wait for the app to sync with the hub, and then you can like control it. And then even like here's the worst part, even when I'm controlling it, like literally pressing the same part of the screen multiple times.
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't work, right? Whereas like a physical controller, you can blindly operate, right? You can literally grab it from your couch and start doing it, just like car controls, right? That's why, again, I ultimately don't like, and there's so many people who agree with me on this, like non-physical controls in a car just really don't work, right? Like, again, like obviously with the caveat of like autonomous vehicles and stuff, but like if you're still driving, right? Like could you imagine, like, take the most physical experience driving a standard car. Could you imagine if switching gears was a touchscreen? Like that'd be the worst thing ever, right?
I mean, that's probably coming, but you're right. It's only going to come whenever that becomes an interaction you're not doing a lot of, right?
Yeah.
Or not doing yourself. I mean, we'll see what happens, right? Again, maybe Apple will surprise us, because I think they're in the best position to maybe make this work with things like, you know, with handoff and things like that, because you're right. Like, I think there's too much friction, but I could see, you know, maybe with Apple TV and you have an iPhone, if it knows you're like sitting down and it just automatically loads up without you having to, like, similar to how, you know, there's a bunch of like auto things that pop up, right? Like things like AirPods and things like that, you know, it just kind of knows. So maybe that kind of works, but I'm actually more inclined that they will let through the physical remote, let you control more, right? Because I think that's coming. I don't know. Does the current Apple TV have a infrared like repeater thing?
So I don't know how it does it. I was trying to figure this out literally today, actually, because there is a way that it really quickly learns how to control your volume. And I don't know if the remote itself is blasting your TV or receiver, or if your remote is sending a signal to the Apple TV and the Apple TV is repeating it out, right? Because it's weird, because like when you like, it's got to be actually the latter, because when you put on your AirPods, your volume on your Apple TV like controls the volume that's being sent to your AirPods, and it doesn't touch the receiver. So it must be a relay. It must be like go to the Apple TV, and the Apple TV like sends it out.
Yeah, so I mean that again, that in a lot of ways is very similar to what Logitech was kind of doing too, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I think that Logitech was probably seeing that, and they obviously can't compete if Apple and these big companies decide to do that, right? They're not gonna, or if the TV manufacturers themselves start doing it, right? Yeah. Logitech probably can't compete on that. So, I think it'll be interesting. I don't think this is solved, but it seems like Logitech is making a early decision to not, continue until it just dies out. But
yeah. And it is sad too, because it is like, again, another sign of the times where it's like one of these companies that's kind of known for doing that market really well, right? It's it's not like Logitech's going to die off. Obviously, they're doing really well in other areas, but it's like they were really known for like being like the only option to get universal remotes in the last.
Yeah, I couldn't even name another one. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so like it's really sad that they've had to like basically that industry has died off, right? So All right, we're gonna take a short break, but we'll be right back after this. And we are back. I decided because every time I do "and we are back," it's so like it's the same one every time. So if I change it up every episode, maybe that'll be a little bit. Yeah. But we also have two other bits that we can get to. So let's start with the first one. Aaron, what is on your noggin?
I'm actually interested. Like, we have a second. I don't think last week we had two, right? I think we just.
No, yeah.
So I'm actually looking forward to the second one. But I there's a few things that I had like written down, but maybe actually, kind of continuing on something you said around tactile controls. I don't know if. I think we had talked about this or brought it up at some point, but now I guess it's official. Have you seen Spotify's car thing that they released?
Yes. Yeah. We had reported on the rumor last week, and now and I didn't realize it's actually being called car thing. Yeah. I thought that was just a reference anyway. So yeah.
So I don't know if you saw the details, and it was pretty cool. I actually saw one of basically the lead product designer on Twitter had a whole thread explaining the whole process and everything. This I'll kind of quickly summarize it, but basically Spotify, the big music streaming company, has released this really neat, they're calling it the car thing, but what it is this physical device that if you are a Spotify member, and actually it's only US, I believe right now, but this thing is free, which is crazy. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, that I did not hear.
Yeah, so if you're a Spotify subscriber, at least for now, you don't have to pay anything for this. But it's a physical hardware device, and they say it's targeted towards people with older vehicles. But I don't know if you like. I think even people with newer vehicles might find this appealing. But basically, the idea is if you have an older vehicle, it doesn't have integrated infotainment and things like that. It's a standalone device. You can kind of clip it in various spots, to your air vent and things like that. But basically, it connects directly to your phone. All it does is basically provide a physical interface for Spotify, right? And so you can have it kind of on your dash.
So the part. So it's weird for me because one, I didn't hear it was free, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I did hear that they're kind of using this as a little bit like market research to kind of figure out what they want to do or whatever.
It could be, yeah.
But the part that I don't know if you're gonna bring this up, but the part that just doesn't feel super elegant to me. It's just how much stuff is going on in this, in the sense that like it connects to your phone wirelessly for the internet connection.
Yeah.
But then Bluetooth connects to your car to play the audio, right?
Yeah. So maybe I don't know if there's multiple ways to set it up. Because obviously there's a few things that needs to happen, right? Like this device, as far as I know, I don't think it's not a standalone as in, if you don't have your phone, I don't think it works, right? Like
correct.
You have to pair it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that's one part because, Spotify is a streaming music service. And so obviously you need data connected in some way. And so it needs to connect to the phone on one side. That's one piece of the puzzle. But you're right. The other piece of the puzzle is the audio has to get to your vehicle somehow, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, okay, if it can connect over Bluetooth, that's not too bad because then technically, other than maybe having it plugged in if you need to charge the battery in it, technically it's completely wireless then, which is kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
Because then
but you do need to charge it though. That's the thing.
Yeah, it has a built-in battery. I don't know if it has like an option to auxiliary as well, if you have a really old car without Bluetooth. Because this is where, like, when they said old cars, like, yes and no, right? Like, it's not like you're having a car that doesn't have Bluetooth and you need to use the, if folks actually remember, like, one of those, like, line-in auxiliary cables, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have Bluetooth, potentially, right?
Yeah.
But, I could see this because, again, like, if the battery lasts long enough, then this is pretty neat, right? Like, you get a pretty huge upgrade in terms of like you have, Spotify being able to, be displayed on a physical thing. And I think, again, this is a key thing because I think a lot of people might look at this and maybe think, I can already connect my phone to my car over Bluetooth, or I can play Spotify, right? But going back to what you said, right? I think they really thought through this, hardware device from a very tactile control perspective.
Yeah.
And so it has a really prominent, I don't know how many buttons are on it, but there's a large like knob on it to rotate. And I think you can click it in as well. And I think most of the control goes through that. I don't even know if the screen is touchscreen or not. Like, I don't know if you know that, but
yeah, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I think it might be, but yeah.
Yeah. They primarily have you interact with this through, like a knob that I think among other things, does volume potentially, but lets you kind of navigate through. And I think this is their kind of bet, right? That, and this is interesting, right? Because I think this is going back to what you said, like maybe software is not the answer because if it was, then everyone would just be using their phone directly. Yeah. Yeah. But I think there's a certain element, especially if you're driving, right? Like a phone maybe isn't the most kind of like convenient thing. And it's interesting that they, are taking a bet on this very dedicated device, right? That's very like, tactile, interface focused. So we'll see if this works. I think, I don't think it's guaranteed. I actually think that, again, I maybe they are treating this as a bit of an experiment. I could actually see this basically being shut down in like a year, right?
Yeah, like I think the two things that this thing has going for it is like, I think you're right. Like the fact that it's a dedicated device, I don't think anybody's doing that. Nobody's making a dedicated piece of hardware specifically for music anymore. Yeah. Right? Like just for music and for use in the car. So it's like optimized for that user experience, which I think is actually a very good move. And the second thing I think it has going for it is I do think like Spotify is treating this as an experiment and that it's not necessarily like, oh, we're like the fact that they called it car thing, and are giving it away for free.
Yeah,
they're not
exactly.
They're not making some big splash like this is gonna kill the iPhone. This is gonna whatever. It's just like, hey, this is something that we're just kind of experimenting with. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. But I think if they didn't kind of market it that way, I feel like there's a lot of things like this that have failed. Basically, that are like, that are like, oh yeah, we're I don't know, we're a software company. We're gonna try to get into hardware, and it doesn't really go that well, right? Whereas this, the fact that they're treating it not that way. You're right. The best word to describe this is interesting. Like I don't necessarily like. I would love to see this thing in person. Yeah.
And I think this is the free, again, if you are running an experiment, right? Like, you don't like, you wouldn't want to try to test out the pricing and the product usability and adoption, right? Like, so I think it's smart that at least for now, they're basically saying like, let's eliminate the decision that people might have to make on the price,
Yeah.
right? And then let's just see if they like use it, right? And try it out. So
It is so weird though, because I feel like that gap is really narrow between a car that has enough that you can actually use this versus it doesn't have enough that you already have a decent infotainment system, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think they're going to find out basically like, how big that market actually is. But yeah, I mean, the other thing, like, curious to get your thoughts. Like, I guess like the more general thing, I guess on my mind around this stuff is I feel like it's been really interesting. I think if you look at, whatever the last, with the rise of the power of, phones these days and all the capabilities and more things being, crammed into what you can do with a single device. I feel like, the whole tech industry, especially with mobile devices and things like, it was kind of on a march towards like consolidating everything in one thing, right? One device and a few, like, whether it was the TV industry or whatever, there was this kind of battle to be like, everyone wants everything in one place, right? Like you control everything through voice or your phone or whatever, right? I kind of suspect, and I'm kind of like, kind of want to see this happen, is I think maybe things are going to start trending back the other way. It's not going to be the same as before because, like, again, the original iPhone, right? Steve Jobs' famous announcement, right? Basically, these three devices, right, are one thing now, right? And that was amazing at the time, right? Like, yes, get me that because I definitely want an iPod and like, internet device and a phone all in one, right? That makes sense. But I wonder now if like maybe like there's going to be more demand for really focused, great dedicated devices, and that's going to come back. Yep. And maybe some like what Spotify is trying is kind of an example of that. But I kind of see the appeal in that. I think like now that I think things have matured a lot with smartphones, and everybody kind of knows what does and doesn't work, right? So again, going back to remotes, right? Like I don't think using your phone as a remote, I think we can conclude that doesn't really work, right? As an example. So I think we're now like going back the other way where I think we're going to see some really interesting dedicated devices, dedicated products that are unbundling, I guess, from, like your phone and things like that. And so, maybe the Spotify thing is one example, but yeah, I'd actually like to see more like kind of really dedicated, great, devices and products created.
So where I think the line is for me, where I think it actually, I think if product companies like, okay, so I think there is two places that the like dedicated devices can make money, right? I think the first one is a little bit like snootiness and part of being an elite club, right? It's like, for example, and don't get me wrong, I am totally in this bandwagon. So like I like when I started playing guitar, right? Like I love that when I bought a string winder, right? Like I love when I was like, I'm not going to twist, like these things to like, I'm going to buy a little plastic device that's dedicated for one thing. But that's because I'm like, because I'm a serious guitar person, I have a string winder, right? So I think there is that, right? Where it's like, remember that Bose thing was it Bose or who? No, Sennheiser. That thing to listen to music, right? Like this very dedicated device, right? Whatever that headphone amplifier, or whatever. Yeah. So I think there's a bit of snootiness to it. But here's the other place where I think it makes perfect sense to do exactly what you're talking about. I think this kind of goes back to what we talked about not realizing what you lose in advancing a certain type of product. So for example, we talked about this in the past, how like, putting maps and directions on your phone, you gain a huge amount of convenience in the sense that you gain like, you can look up directions no matter where you are, right? Like you don't have to pre-plan and look up directions and print them out or whatever. Yeah. You have live data and all this stuff like that, right? So you gain a huge amount, right? But what you do lose in having maps on your phone is you lose reliability in the sense that your phone could die of batteries, your phone could lose signal, right? Whereas a piece of paper with directions on it doesn't have that inherent unreliability. Yeah. It's like a piece of paper with written instructions on it has a really high reliability, right? Yep. So I think that's what it is. It's like if by combining things into a certain device, you lose some of that stuff that you get from a dedicated thing. I think that's where it's the re-separation makes sense. So for example, like I don't think separating your contact list into a different device makes any sense. I think having all your contacts on your phone.
I mean, that one's interesting though, right? Because it actually, that is sort of happening, like not the contact list directly.
Yeah.
But like things like the Facebook portal, right?
Right.
And there's rumors now that maybe Apple might be making something similar, but that is a version of that where like basically Facebook, it's for the purpose of chatting with people over video, but technically they've taken something that you could have done just sitting on a computer, right, in your contact list, and they contain that now in a device that's dedicated just to that.
That's
just
true.
to communicate with your contact list, right? So
that's a good point. That's a good point. Now that I feel like is interesting because that's like almost like it's not something that we ever had. Like we never had like the first version of video conferencing we had was on our phones. Yeah. And then they kind of created dedicated device. I almost feel like music is an interesting one, right? Because I think music, I still don't think actually we've lost much. Like going from an iPod to an iPhone, I actually don't think we've lost anything because it's actually quite quick to launch a music player. Yeah. It's still controllable through your head. Like it would be, I'll tell you, it would be really annoying if like we had to go into the app specifically to adjust our volume. Then we've lost that convenience, right?
Yes.
But, but music, I feel like we haven't lost that. So I feel like a dedicated music player wouldn't make sense at this point, right?
But I mean, I would say like, again, going back to, you call it sturdiness, but like, I think there's a certain aspect, and Apple has been kind of doing this, right? Like you and I both, are I don't want to say victims, I guess, like willing participants or, very happy with this stuff, but
very suggestible.
Like, where things like the iPad and even the like Apple Watch and stuff like I think they're so great because they've almost moved into like like yes you could have an iPhone or a MacBook and do all this stuff, right? But they've kind of been much more purpose, right? Like purpose based, and I think that's when they're the most enjoyable, to be honest, right? Yeah. Like I find the iPad the most enjoyable when I basically fully buy into like I could do everything on this, right? And that's what I thought before. I'm like, cool, I could do everything on an iPad. And that is true, but that's actually not what I enjoy doing the most on it. I actually enjoy like, again, the consumption experience, right? Where I'm reading things or, it's a great display to have in your hand, right? Different than what I would do on a MacBook or on my phone. So I actually think that, the music thing, like, I think that you could sell and maybe the thing here is it used to be these things were completely separate and then we put it all into a phone. Maybe you can take the best of both worlds from kind of the past and what phones do now, where it's not completely separate. It's still tied to your Apple Music or Spotify, but it would actually be kind of nice just to have like sitting around somewhere for anyone, guests, anyone, to basically access all this music in a dedicated device, right? Yeah. Because then it's sort of like if someone wants to go play something, I know it's not a lot of work, but they don't have to go through the whole process of, browsing on their phone, connecting to a speaker in your house or whatever, right?
That's exactly right. So that's a good example of something we lost, right? By embedding our music players into our phones, we've lost the casualness of like somebody else coming to your house and playing a song. Yeah. Right. Like I need your, like, actually we lose that with the iPad too, right? Like something that the iPad you lose from a computer is that for someone to use your iPad, it's like they're into all your stuff, right? There's no
I mean, they couldn't even unlock it without.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. Right. And
it's
and
behind
I feel like
a wall,
that's
which is good. Yeah. You want your iPad by default to be secure, right? So,
But then here's the other problem, right? I feel like if companies start to do the separation, I think where they're failing, and they have failed in the past, is it's like another layer of losing, right? So I talked about the map example, right? Like you add maps and stuff to your phone, you lose reliability, right? But you gain like all this other crazy stuff, right? Yeah. You gain like real-time data, you gain being able to look it up wherever you are or whatever, all this stuff like that, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I feel like when you go to the dedicated thing, you might end up losing some of those benefits that were introduced. So for example, I think the biggest place where we've seen this happen is cameras. So the biggest advantage I think that cameras introduced by being on your phone is that you always had it on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like it's this camera that you always had on you. So like no matter how good standalone cameras became, right? And I'm pretty into filming and all this stuff like that, and I have fancy cameras, but I so rarely use them because I don't have them.
And not just on you, but also connected to your entire world and internet, right?
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
you don't, like even if I had a really nice camera, even the ones that connect through Wi-Fi or whatever,
Still.
it's a huge pain, right? Whereas I can instantly, send a photo to anyone, right? Just
Exactly,
message them.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like I think when these companies are like, oh, we're gonna make this awesome dedicated music player. Well, guess what? Like the music player that's on a phone is probably like 90% of what you offer.
Yeah.
Plus, it has the major advantage that it's always on you.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be a new maybe category product that, again, it's not a full standalone. I think it's more of a dedicated companion device. Mm-hmm. But again, I could see Apple someday, maybe their HomePod line evolves to a very dedicated thing where it's still, connected to a primary device like a phone or an iPad.
Yeah.
Right. But it reduces the friction of that use case of just playing music. Maybe you don't have to unlock it. So I could see that work. And even the map example, again, I don't know if this is a good idea, but again, if you just mention all the things you would want to avoid, right? Like all the pitfalls. Well, I mean, that, like maybe that is what, it's kind of crazy to think, but we used to have these dedicated GPS things, right? Like, but again, all like those died because they weren't internet connected, like they weren't updated. So imagine maybe they came back, but it was primarily connected to your phone, right? But maybe, again, so that solves the connectivity part and stuff like that. Maybe they're more reliable because, maybe it's sort of like a Kindle or something where...
Yeah, it has an e-ink or something like that. So
I could see it being the best of kind of both worlds. So again, I don't know if these things will, sell, but I think that's maybe the future, right? Where we see kind of products like that. And I actually wouldn't mind that. Like, again, like I actually, for some of these, I actually would maybe prefer it, right? Like...
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is that category that you're talking about. I think that people are starting to because I think there's another use case for these types of products. And I think the use case for those types of products is really, it's when you explicitly want to get away from like your phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's why like things like the light phone and stuff like that really intrigue me, because I love the idea. Like I wish I had a device that was just like iMessage and WhatsApp and that's it. Nothing else on it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is like these devices, like I've kind of watched a couple of reviews of like the light phone and they had this like Palm, that like a Palm came out with something that looked like a mini iPhone and it was like a companion device and stuff like that. And the one review that I watched was like, none of these are quite good enough. To be honest, if you want that, just buy another iPhone and only install the apps that you want and leave it at that. Yeah, no.
And so I was gonna say like that, like to be like, it's kind of ridiculous, but the easiest solution right now is to have multiple devices, right?
Yeah.
Like, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, the music player one, you could kind of, a workaround is you get another iPad, leave it unlocked, maybe because you can technically do this with Spotify. Like the only thing you have on it, you don't have anything else. You just have Spotify installed or Apple Music, right?
Yep.
And nothing else, and like you would just have that sitting. But again, that just seems inelegant. And
but
kind of
what's
a waste,
interesting?
right?
What's interesting? You bring up a good point though, where I'm kind of contradicting myself here in terms of like a dedicated music player not really working, because like Sonos is a great example of this, right? Because Sonos, I mean, you log in, yes, with your account, but anybody can go up to a Sonos thing and tell it to play music or whatever, right?
Yeah. So, again, I have like a Sonos system, and this is actually one of my gripes with it is that is partially true. So Sonos, can connect to, whatever music service, but actually until recently, they do have a new device now that you can do the old school, Bluetooth connection.
Right.
From a phone. So they do have that now. But again, it's such a nice system and it works so well. But again, I wish there was I would love to set up a dedicated device that just basically plays stuff on my Sonos system. Yeah. But again, it seems clunky. I'm not going to put an iPad there. Like it seems a bit clunky, right? So if there was, again, in the vein of something like the Spotify, like the car thing, right? If there was something like that, I think that actually could do really well, right? Because again, it's a nice kind of, especially if it's like, if they can make it cheaper than wasting money on like an iPhone or iPad just to do that, then I think a lot of people would go for it. And if it's just focused on that one use case, I could actually see people, buying something like that.
I think kind of back to the realm of like kind of stuff where you can get away from your device and stuff. I feel like there is a software solution for that, right? I feel like Apple's kind of getting there with their kind of like screen time and all this stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I would love it if I just had like a profile on my phone called like, you know, relax mode or whatever. And it's like, it's got a couple of my apps that I want and everything else is do not disturb and all this stuff like that. Like, I feel like the controls are kind of getting there, but they're not quite there yet.
It's hard to set up. You got to really work around things.
Like one of the biggest things I wish right now I could do is I wish, like, because you know you can have like do not disturb, but your favorite contacts get through. Yeah. Right. Like I wish you could do that for like messages and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, I want these people to be able to message me, but nobody else. Yeah. Right. Like, or exactly. I want notifications from these things, but nothing else. Like one of the biggest issues I deal with right now, it's such a stupid issue, but it's like when I order Uber Eats, I basically 90% of the time I have my phone on do not disturb, which is probably really annoying for people who want to try to get a hold of me, but I basically always have it on do not disturb. But the brief time that I do take it off is Uber Eats, because I need to I need to look when they're coming. And then finally what I did actually is I actually put my lobby buzzer number into my favorites. Right. So that thing would go through or whatever, right? But I feel like this is a stupid hack. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, and I hope Apple, you know, does this. And if not, like, actually maybe this is like an app idea for, like, maybe you and I should build it, or whoever's listening to this, go build this. But I really hope that, you know, the future here is much more intuitive and aware of what you're doing, because you can do that stuff today. But like you say, like even do not disturb, right? You have to manually do it, or you put it on a schedule. It's not perfect, right? Like, and it doesn't really know when you're in a car, right? You have to kind of tell it you're driving, things like that. But imagine a future where, like, you know, maybe when you're at your desk, you know, it does something. Maybe it knows when, you know, you're in your bedroom, and then, you know, for the night it would turn everything off. And then, you know, when you leave that, you know, it would know. Maybe it knows when you're in your car, right? So I think, again, with the stuff that they're putting in the phones now to really know, you know, based off beacons or whatever, where you are, right? I think that is a much better future, where your phone just kind of knows the situation you're in, and then it, you know, it kind of does its thing, right? And, you know, we're seeing that with their HomePod stuff as well, where if you're close to a HomePod, it'll bring up the music stuff. So I think we're getting there, but yeah, I think there's something like, I kind of want to see the dedicated device kind of stuff come back, but without the pitfalls of, like, you know, what they were before and all the advantages. So yeah, that's my prediction. We'll see what happens, I guess.
All right. Do you like your current devices or not? Let us know. podcast.etc@gmail.com or tweet at us at Twitter. All right. We're going to come to a close here on this episode. But before we do, I did want to give a little shout out to Brody. We didn't get to his do your thing, but he did mention that Netflix.
Was that the second?
That was the second thing. But Brody did mention that Netflix did sign a deal with Sony Pictures. This is kind of sad news because it means none of the Spider-Mans are going to be on Disney Plus. Kind of annoying, but whatever. I mean, most people have both anyway, so it's not the biggest deal. But yeah, I did want to mention Brody's been a big supporter of us over the years, so I did want to give him a little bit of support. His short film that he wrote a couple years ago and was made a couple years ago, it is now streaming for free as part of the Ottawa Canada Film Festival. Thanks to Dave. Thanks to Dave for tweeting about it, but retweeting about it. But yeah, definitely check it out. OCanFilmfest.ca. You can find all the information. Anyways, his short film is called The Gift. Check it out. You can watch it for free today. So anyways, we are coming to a close on this episode 65, penultimate episode of season 7 of the ETC podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, be sure to email us at podcast.etc@gmail.com. Tweet at us at the ETC podcast, and visit our official website, anchor.fm/the-etc-podcast. The ETC podcast is currently hosted on anchor.fm, but distributed to all your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, and more. You can also see the video version of our podcast. It is on YouTube / a really long URL. Just search the ETC podcast, Aaron Sedanker or Casey Lee. But as for now, that is it for this wonderful Thursday, April 15th, 2021, episode 65 of the ETC podcast. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Sedanker.
We'll see you guys next week.
Car Thing's actually a pretty good name.